Salve omnibus. Yes, I am just spoofing Google Translate now. All right, this is probably going to be another long one, so let's not waste any more precious time on preamble. For those who are new around here, I have 3 fundamental rules set forth for myself on this channel. 1. Don't speak on subjects about which I know nothing, or if I do, make it abundantly clear that's what I have done. Number 2. Don't speak on tired, topical, or controversial subjects, unless I have something new and/or interesting to add to the conversation. And number 3, if addressing topical or controversial matters, never take a moralistic stance or tout abstract or personal principles as objective facts. Morality isn't objective. Consequences, meaning the results of actions, are. Now, with all that on the table, considering I mean to talk about fantasy today, a topic nearly as old as the concept of fiction itself, this begs an important question. Just what could I possibly have to say on it that everyone else and their dog hasn't already beaten to death, mashed into paste, and served in a Chinese restaurant? Well, for those who don't know, which, judging by my analytics, is most of you, I am a self-published author, now a fledgling YouTuber. I've written 4 full-length, and by full-length I mean bordering on 700 pages, science fantasy adventure novels so far, with a 5th one well in the works. As well, I've written 3 full-lore encyclopedias on the same, and even converted the whole lot into a tabletop RPG, though I'm still in the process of actually making those sales-worthy. On top of all that, I've also penned a pair of odd side pieces espousing my personal thoughts on life, the universe, and all that pertains thereto. The Noble Ape, and A Wolf's Guide to Arcane Philosophy. All linked down where you'd expect. Now, before anyone goes on thinking that this video is just an elaborate excuse to peddle the various scents and oils of my own personal hobbies, the point I'm ponderously driving towards is that, as a consequence of my fully mobilized autism, I've conjured up many thoughts and theories over the years about the form, function, structure, and mechanics of both fiction as a whole and fantasy as a genre. In particular, I have grown a deep and abiding interest in the social and psychological roots and flowers of make-believe. And so it's from that angle I will try to come at the subject from here, the operative word, of course, being try. I will state outright that I am by no means the first, nor by any stretch the most qualified person to ponder on these things, and I thus in no way claim any form of expert status. I'm just a guy who's passionate about stories and about the metaphysical powers contained therein. Though, as always, I will do my best to corroborate my propositions with facts and evidence. At the end of the day, they are all still only my opinions and should be treated as such. I should also disclaim before we get too far down this rabbit hole that I am in no way religious. I am not an advocate for any religion, nor religion as a whole, but nor do I necessarily oppose its practice. In my perfect world, I would have everyone follow a secular philosophy, preferably one of their own independent derivation. But I've also been around the sun enough times to know that this will never happen, and have some fair inclinations as to why, at least not without a radical update to our species' firmware of the like, hitherto unheard of in the whole natural history of our planet. The reason I feel the need to disclaim this is because I announced at the end my video, The 3 Laws of Divinity, my intention to knit together the realms of fantasy and religion. And so, in the interest of giving no one the wrong impression, I will state right off the bat my sincere conviction that fantasy can do everything religion does for society better and without any of the negative side effects. Some of you will no doubt think this an all too natural conclusion, while others will almost certainly call it heretical to even suggest a comparison between their system of faith and the fantastical worlds of other. However, before I can explain myself in detail, I must first lay out the core attitude and altitude of my thesis's frame. Namely, what exactly is meant here by fantasy, and what exactly is a religion? The cop-out answer is, go watch my 2 other videos, Is Woke a Religion and The Theory of Everything, which take a deep Socratic scalpel to each query in respective turn. However, the more productive answer is, to quote directly from the source, a religion I've hitherto defined as a traditional, moralistic belief system centered around the ideological devotion to a divine idol, which I've defined as an inspirational icon, i.e., an image of something we aspire to imitate, unquote. So, why do we do this? Well, to summarize, gods are powerful, hence people want to be like them, and thus they erect monuments, invent elaborate rituals, and concoct vast compendiums of lore to attempt to explain, commune with, tap into, or otherwise lure the vast cosmic forces that rule their lives into their service. As illustrated by this helpful diagram, historically, religion can be thought of as the great cultural multi-tool, whose functionality revolved around answering the four fundamental questions of human existence. Where am I? How did I get here? Where am I meant to be going? And why do I care? It did this by providing a structural narrative explanation for life, the universe, and everything, upon which the everyman could reliably hang his hat, thus alleviating him from the burden of having to think too much on any subject, and relieving him of the nihilistic weight of knowing that to the apathetic void from whence we came, we still remain, and shall inevitably return. The problem most frequently encountered by this model is that most people are simple animals, and as simple minds crave simple solutions to complex problems, over time the rituals and rites that give meaning and order to the world become denigrated, corrupted, and are dumbed down in order to appeal to the broadest possible demographic. Eventually, they are hollowed out, wrung of all transcendental meaning, and left to wither under the harsh sun, until all that's left is a vapid shell of political platitudes and childish drivel. Thus, a more stable, or a more easily replaceable, medium for understanding is required. One whose roots are not so deep as to upturn the civilizational bedrock, but also not so shallow as to get washed away in the rushing waters of life. To prevent this script from becoming 15 miles long, I'll again refer you to two of my other videos, The Theory of Everything and The Human Question, for more lengthy exploration on that front. But where does fantasy fit into this? Well, the problem for modern people is that our modern understanding of reality has evolved beyond what simple storybook paradigms can cover. Trying to write a digestible story that perfectly encompasses the totality of the cosmos in all its infinite complexity is like trying to fit all the world's oceans into a teacup. And as our comprehension of the universe has expanded beyond what any single vessel can hope to contain, so too do our social, political, and cultural narratives begin to follow in that overworked Chinaware's footsteps, and begin to crack, and eventually shatter, spilling their esoteric contents back onto the naked earth. In other words, the role of mythology, of story, has been usurped by science. The nature of what and where and how the cosmos operates is no longer a readily transmutable vessel. It has a fixed set of proportions, dimensions, and thus limitations, boundary lines that man is absolutely, unequivocally forbidden from crossing. And as the role of science is not, or at least should not be, to proselytize on behalf of the popular fallacy of the one best way, this is where the realm of fairy truly enters the equation. Once again, for reasons of brevity, I'll defer to the progenitor of the modern myth himself, J.R.R. Tolkien, for my definition of fantasy, and I will also point you at his ontological work, Tree and Leaf, for further exploration of the subject, as I mean not to plagiarize the good professor here. To quote, "Fantasy is the purest and most potent kind of art because it requires subcreation of a secondary world." Unquote. If you've been a child, or been in proximity of one for any appreciable amount of time, you are no doubt well aware of the mind-bending, reality-warping power of the innocent imagination. This was the view, as heavily compressed and paraphrased by me and my understanding of Tolkien's philosophy in regards to the function and purpose of fantasy as a means of indulging the innocent, playful aspect of humanity, that which the real world, in all its compulsive nihilism, forces us to suppress and all too often outright murders in its sleep. And he wasn't alone in his viewing fantasy as a means of escapism from a cruel and depressing world. Other such notables as Terry Pratchett and George Lucas, who, yes, is a fantasy writer. Star Wars is a fantasy setting with a sci-fi paint job, have each expounded in their own ways upon this. This was perhaps most poignantly expressed in Terry Pratchett's Discworld novel, The Hogfather, appropriately enough by the Grim Reaper when speaking to his adoptive granddaughter on the necessity of the titular Hogfather, their world's version of Santa Claus. To wit, humans need fantasy to be human, to be the place where the fallen angel meets the rising ape. You need to believe in things that are not real, for how else can they become? A core theme you might have noticed emerging is that fantasy allows at once for escape from reality, but also, and far more importantly in my view, It can and does serve as a vessel for profound excavation of life's most vital truths by filtering them through the transluminal lens of dream, much like how comedy allows us to broach unpleasant topics by couching them in laughter. Fantasy lets us see what we'd rather not, to do battle with the great dragons of the infernal abyss, by moving the battlefield from the outside world, which is large and scary and can actually kill you, to the personal and much smaller realm of your own thoughts. There you have control. There you are, Lord. You are sovereign, or at least you think you are. But before anyone gets it into their head that this is some sort of magical get-out-of-jail-free card, I must express that the greatest singular point of failure of all systems of human thought is user error. Ideas are just tools, and like any tool, they have the potential to do great good as well as great ill, as well as nothing of any use to anyone whatsoever. Once again, go see my videos, The Civilizational Pasture, The Social Balance Wheel, and The Human Question for further thoughts on the underlying reasons for our species' compulsory inhibition of our greatest cognitive attributes. Here's where I believe fantasy offers a superior alternative to religion, for not only do the truths embedded in otherworld narratives land as holy as those in any faith-based system of epistemology or spirituality, they do so in such ways as to not come into conflict with empirical facts, and also prove more resistant to mutation, distillation, and vandalization due to its relative lack of ego investment. I.e., if ever one of our stories falls victim to ideological possession, political corruption, or innocent mistranslation, it can be discarded and replaced by one more reflective of the actuality of life with comparatively little fuss. Also, since we aren't trying to compress the totality of human knowledge into a pocket-sized folio, our modern cultural Moors, TV, movies, literature, and so on, are more free to exercise creative liberty in reflecting the audience's sociological values. Where, when religion fails, the whole world falls to anarchy. When a book or movie or television franchise goes belly up for any one of 1,000 reasons, 10 more quickly spawn out of the woodwork to replace it, thereby preserving the cultural values of the times without endangering the real, substantive meaning and truth of life, the universe and everything. All right, I think that's enough tilling and planting done for one day. This was originally supposed to be a 2 to 5 minute addendum to my 4 kinds of fantasy video, but instead, it's turned into a whole second volume of my theory of everything. Maybe that's what I'll end up calling it. In any event, I think I've prattled on long enough. As the saying goes, best to leave while they still want you to stay. Hopefully I'll see you around real soon. Until then, stay safe, stay sane, and may your dreams be ever light.